Okay, Tommy, don't worry about recording anymore. I think I've started the recording here already. Just to
Okay then.
confirm again, everyone can still hear me, right?
Yes, we can.
All right then. Um, Let me go back to my presentation. Oh, yeah. So we are back. We are going. The class is going to be on presenting your designs like a pro. So we are going to be talking about how we can present our designs like a pro. We will divide it into different sections. The first one is telling a story, and the second, stories aren't boring. The third, sets the tone. Fourth, show your workings. Fifth, prepare to speak. Sixth, blow their minds, and then we finally conclude. So this is how we are going to structure the class today. Let's start from the first one. So it is important when we are trying to present our work for us to tell a story. I mean, people love stories, everyone loves stories, but it depends on who's listening to that story, why you are telling the story to them, and how you want them to respond after telling them the story. So, if we are putting that in the context of presenting our work to others, it means that we are going to make sure that when we are presenting our work, in this case, we are going to be talking about our work being our case studies, yeah? Because I believe that one of the major things that the a beginner designer or a newbie designer starting out in the industry should is going to be faced with when it comes to presenting is going to be presenting their case studies. Of course, there are other things you need to present, like you might need to present your work to your like you might need to present your work to stakeholders. You might also need to present in a setting like the one I am in currently, where you're presenting to other people to kind of like impact knowledge. But we are going to be talking for the purpose of this presentation. We are going to be talking in the context of presenting your case study. So that said, you would want to find out the first thing, who are you presenting to? So who is going to be reading that case study? Is it going to be your fellow designers? Is it going to be random tech people on Twitter? Is it going to be your recruiters? Or is it going to be who exactly is going to be reading your case study? Who is the target audience? Who is it for? So if you can be able to identify that, then you've started telling a good story. The next thing you want to check is why you are presenting it to them. So you want to find out why are you trying to present this case study, because for every single thing you want to do, you have to have a reason, right? So if you figure out the reason for wanting to present this case study to them, it can be able to help you know how you are going to structure the case study, how you are going to place your elements. Then the last thing is how you want them to respond. Now you've been able to figure out who you are presenting to, you've been able to figure out why you are presenting to these people, and then you the next thing is how you want them to respond. What action do you want them to take at the end of your case study, at the end of your story, right? What action do you want them to take? In this case, if we are presenting our case studies, I would assume that majority of us would want to be considered or moved to the next stage of the application. I mean, most times you will submit your portfolio and your resume through a job board, and you are submitting it along with various other applicants as well. Now it gets to this particular part when it gets to yours, they are reading through yours. and yours has to stand out. So if you are putting all these things into consideration, then this last part now is going to now determine what they are going to do after they've come to yours. So now they've seen your case study. How do you want them to respond? And it all begins by telling a good story. If you are able to tell a good story, you would be able to catch the attention of these people, and you would be able to move yourself up, take yourself higher up in the rankings of who is going to be considered for that opportunity. Dictionary.com defines a story as a narrative, either true or fictitious, in prose or verse, designed to interest, amuse, or instruct the reader. So, when you are trying to tell your story about a problem that you solved in your case study, you should be able to find out, or you should be able to do one of these three things: interest, amuse, or instruct the people that you are going for. Of course, the major ones there is going to be to interest them, and as much as possible even instruct them, because many times we are solving problems because the solutions is not currently being solved properly. So if you want to be able to get considered, it means that you might need to instruct people that are going to be considering you for the job in the proper way that this solution can actually be implemented. So I'm starting with a story here. Let's imagine for the sake of our presentation that a certain guy that we are going to call Luffy has issues crafting a good CV. Now, how are we going to turn this into a case study that might make sense? So yeah, we've talked about stories. The thing is, as much as stories can interest, amuse, or instruct, some stories are boring, and that is a fact. Some stories are actually boring, but it should not be. Yours should not be boring, because what happens when stories are boring is that people would slip off. In this case, you are going to get dropped off. So a recruiter is browsing through your case study, your case study presentation, and they're looking at the story you're trying to tell them. It's not quite cohesive. It's not adding up what's going to happen. They would skip. They would skip. There's a research study that was conducted recently shows that recruiters only spend an average of 3 to 5 minutes on your entire portfolio. So they are looking at, if you have three case studies on your portfolio, they are looking at all the three of them in the space of 3 to 5 minutes. That means that if they tap one of your case study, it only takes them around 15 seconds for them to be able to know that your case study is worth actually spending their next 3 minutes on. But we'll talk about that more later. The thing is, the point is, we are going to try as much as possible to make sure that our whole story is not a boring one. Your presentation should not be a boring one. Instead, it should be something that's going to pique the interest of whoever is looking at your case study. You've identified who is going to be looking at your case study. Let's say, for example, it's going to be a recruiter. So now, how do you pick the interest of the recruiter to make sure that they are not bored when looking at your case study? Now, we talked about our previous guy, Luffy, that has issues finding his fixing up his CV. Now, he visits a particular website. Let's assume that Luffy visits a particular website and he does a lot of scrolling. He's coming there because he wants to be able to write a good CV. He probably has tried it on his own, but it's not entering. Unfortunately, after visiting this website, he's not finding a good way to get the CV. So what happens? He leaves. There is something that happens a lot, actually. It happens a lot. And that is the reason why many websites don't get to have many people actually signing up for their products. So it's a matter of they come and they don't sign up and then they leave. I don't know if you are following the story progression. We started from Luffy. We've identified someone. Now this person has issues. His current issue, a broad view of his issue is that he has issues setting up his CV. He comes to this particular website, let's say cvbuilder.a.com, and then he does a lot of scrolling. And because the website is not really good at selling what they do correctly, he's not able to find what he's looking for, and because of that, he leaves without doing what he came there to do. What happens? That's because the bounce rates of the landing page were very high. So we are going to talk about giving them context. You've identified your recruiters are the ones that you are trying to reach out to. You're starting your case study, you're starting your story. The first part of the story is providing context on what this story is about. What are they supposed to expect as they visit, as they are running through your case study, as they are running through your presentation? What's coming ahead? This is going to help them understand the context of your work and help them to stay in perspective as they continue to read through your presentation. So, for example, we have used the example of Luffy. We could say a potential problem statement for this story of Luffy, if you are going to be helping Luffy to solve this problem, is the bounce rate of this landing page, cover cvbuilder.a.com, was very high. And to fix this, I redesigned the landing page to improve the retention and click rates on the CMO, on the sign up button. So that's your that's like the overview of your case study presentation. Now you've given them context on what to expect inside your case study. You started by telling them a story. The story is about this particular person that is having issues trying to access a particular service, and you have gone further to tell them about what exactly was the issue the person was having, which is the bounce rate. The bounce rate is the rate at which people leave without doing what they came there to do. So there are many people like Luffy that are leaving without coming, and this is what you set out to fix. Now, this is all word of mouth. Why exactly should they believe you? Why should they believe anything that you say? That's where we come to showing the numbers behind your research. So you are coming to these people and you are just telling them about this random Luffy guy that is having issues trying to build the CV, and then you say that you notice that many people drop off without doing what they came there to do, and that's the reason for your redesign. That's the reason behind this whole project. But how are they sure? I think I I think I just stopped sharing. Can't see my screen anymore, right? Yeah, my network is bad. Shit. All right. It says, can you guys hear me? Okay. Okay. Let me see. Let me see if I can log in back. Oh, Oh, only one. All right. Um. Okay, I think I'm back in now. Sorry. Very sorry. Um. Yeah. Uh, Please, I need to confirm. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right
We
then.
can hear you, sure, bro.
Okay. So I was saying that we can try to show the numbers behind our research. This would involve letting these recruiters know what exactly prompted us to come to that decision? How can we validate the fact that these problems are actually happening? How do we know? And this is where you present the your research work. How many percent of people face this problem? This is something that you'd have gotten from your research. You have analyzed how many people are like Luffy in our example that face this problem. How did you get this figure? Did you do secondary research or primary research? Did you pass out Google Forms? Did you do guerrilla testing where you went out to the streets and were just asking people to use the website and see whether they would find it easy or difficult to find what they went to do? Or did you use a focus group where you gathered a couple of people together, say like 5 people, ask them to use the website while you watch them actually use the website? What exactly did you do? How did you come to this figure that so percentage of people usually drop out? And how did you arrive as a solution? This is where you now make a detailed explanation of how you got to that point in your case study. So you are talking about how you were able to start brainstorming. You maybe did the crazy hits that was talked about at a few classes ago, or you used empathy mapping, or you used the prioritization grid to prioritize your features during your feature ideation process, or any of all these processes that you actually used. What was the process? How did you do it? So this is where you show the numbers behind your research, because in this section you are trying to prove to the recruiters that you actually do know what you did and you are sure that it is very correct. And after this, what happens is that you prepare to pick, because you've gotten to this point where you've introduced them to the story. You've shown them Luffy. You've shown them Luffy's problem. You've shown them that Luffy's problem is actually valid. You've gone ahead to solve Luffy's problem in a very creative way. You're getting their attention now. It's getting to the high point of the story. You need to really prove to them that this problem is was worth solving and you solved it correctly. The problem should be what drives the solution. The solution has come already. Like all those, you've talked about how you were able to, all the processes that led to this particular moment. It's ready. It's time for you to actually now go ahead and unveil your solution. So you need to make them want it. You can liken it to when you are at one of all these fast food restaurants, but not really this local type. The type where you stay, you ask for what you want, and you literally watch them make what you want. So you are there, they start, they collect your order, you are there, you are watching them, you are watching the chef do his thing. He's adding all the ingredients in his style, mixing everything, using the pan, everything. It looks like a very beautiful process. The chef is doing all these things expertly while also making you want to eat it immediately, because the process looks beautiful and you are very sure that the end result will be as beautiful as the process. So eventually the chef presents the meal. But what they do before presenting it is make you long for it. So if we are relating that to our case study, if we are relating that to our story, we are relating that to our presentation, you want to make your readers long for your solution. How do you do that? You ask the how might we questions. How might we help Luffy to come to the site and successfully start fixing his CV? So you've how exactly can we help them? How is by now putting all the solutions that you have put into into like puts it into their face, like give them your end result and you give them hot. You showcase all the results of your research and your brainstorming. You show your screens, you show the features, If you redesign the landing page, this is where you actually show them the landing page. You start from the beginning, the hero section. You show them what exactly was wrong in the previous design and what exactly you fixed. If it was the get started button being too small or not, or the picture covering the button in the way, then this is the point where you put the hero section and the two hero sections side by side. You show new, you show old, and then you are showing them this is what is in the new that fixed what was in the old. When you're doing this, then you're helping them to see the that all the things that you actually did were worth it, and it was actually a real solution that was good, that was better used, better utilized. You are showing them everything. From the hero section, you move to the maybe the feature section, or you move to down to the footer. Any part of the landing page that you felt like had issues, if it was with the flow, if it was with the information placement, maybe the information weren't being placed correctly in the old iteration of the landing page. Your new iteration, the one that is more user focused and user centered, should be able to show that there was a major difference, there was a big difference in what was there before and what is coming. That is how you sell that this thing you actually did, all this research work actually proved true. How do you do this? You can now move to the last part of, if you remember from one of your classes, the last part of the design process, which involves usability testing. So after you've shown your particular design, you can test it with other folks. You can test it. You go back to the people that you tested with when you were trying to find out what exactly was the problem with Luffy's with Luffy not being able to complete the task he was trying to complete. You go back to meet people like Luffy now and you're meeting them and you're like, I've fixed this problem. Or you don't even necessarily have to tell them you fixed this problem. Just give it to them and then watch them actually try to do this exactly the same thing that they were trying to do before. And then find out what exactly changed. Is there an improvement? Are they finding it difficult for are they finding it easier, sorry, to do what they were originally coming to do? You record the percentages again. For example, in our previous examples, we had a 67%. Let's imagine that this 67% meant that 67% of people that visit this website actually click the sign up button. 85% of people that click the sign up button don't create an account. And 91% of people that create an account don't use the product. So now you're giving them back again. And we are trying to see this 67% of people that visit the website at the first time without doing anything, without going further. Is it reducing? If your iteration of your design, if your redesign, if you really fixed Luffy's problem, the number should reduce. You tested with a focus group of 5 people previously. You asked all of them to use the website. 3 people were able to go forward and actually complete. 2 people could not. But when you are testing again, you should have at least like four of everybody trying to focus on the task. Like they should be able to complete their task effectively if your work is to be complete, for you to have something that actually works now. So these numbers are something that you can now subtract, and it helps when you're presenting your metrics at the end. For example, our 67% of people that are not that are visiting the website but not going ahead to actually click on the get started button. After my redesign, that number reduced from 67% to 26%. That means that I was able to record a 41% improvement in reducing the bounce rates of cvbuilder.a.com. Now that's a valid metric. That's a metric that will do what we what we want to achieve in this particular point. What you want to achieve here is blow their minds and end it very well. So if we give them that particular metric, a 41% reduction in the bounce rate is a very big deal for any company, because if you are having, say, 400,000 web visitors, let's just start small. If you're having, say, 400 web visitors, and all 41% of people now start converting, which means that at least you're having at least around 100,000 of your visitors trying to use your product. So it's a big win. That means that the problem you originally set out to solve was actually solved. Now, you could have solved this problem, but if you're not including it at the end of your resume, in this part where you're supposed to blow their minds, then it's not being shown very well. Remember, the recruiter that's visiting your portfolio to see these things were not there when the case study, when you were going through all your rigorous process of the first test, the second test. And yeah, this is just a side note, but remember how I said that when we are doing your second, when you are doing your redesign, if there's no increase or, or reduction in the problem you're trying to solve from your original research, then your work wasn't properly done. It's something that actually happens quite a lot. It's not every time you get reduction, and it's fine. You could completely test out your work, and after getting a 67% bounce rate during your original research, you test your new work with people, and you're like, I've put in hours into this. I've done the research. I've done all the processes. I've done all the ideation. You have fire screens already. You want to test it again. And you now end up having 80% bounce rate, where more people are even dropping off than before. It's fine. It's something that happens. It has actually happened to me personally. When I was working on a previous project of mine, that I tried to analyze how many people found it difficult. I was using a usability testing platform called Maze, and I shared my prototype with folks, and they told me that people, the percentage of people that could get to a particular screen but not get to the one after that is around 40%. And I went and I dug into my data, and I found out that probably the reason why these people are not being able to do this is because the microcopy, the text that I used to write the things on the navbar sections was too ambiguous. So I should probably tone down the grammar. And so I changed it from an ambiguous word to a simpler version of the same word. And I did it again. I ran the test again, shared out the prototype link to people. And it actually increased. Like the amount of people that could not progress to the next step increased. I was very frustrated, but it's part of the it's part of the joys of design, because we pride ourselves as problem solvers. So that's a valid problem that needed solving. So what happens is you go back to the drawing board again, and you start and you try to find out what exactly was the problem. If this was not the problem, what was the problem that made people not to do this? And then you go back and you test again, and you find out that maybe then the number now eventually reduces. Number of people not moving to the next stage actually reduces. As we can see from like this small graph that I've been trying to draw throughout the entire process, it's not a linear thing. The process of telling your story doesn't have to be a straight line. It's not a linear thing. Instead, it has the times where it goes up and the times where it's really crawling and it's not really picking up the pace. And it's fine, because a story has an introduction, it has the middle, and it has the end. So in the middle, you might not really have a lot of picking, just like we had in this particular section here. But at this point where you're trying to give your design to them, where you're trying to give a hot, you're trying to blow their minds, that's where it peaks. So this is your opportunity for you to catch their interest by giving them all the metrics. You blow their minds, you give them fire designs, you give them the metrics from your testing to prove that you really did solve this problem. And after this, what happens? You conclude or you wrap things up. That's where you give your final thoughts and your conclusions. What did you learn in the course of this project? Every project that you do, you actually have to learn something, no matter how small it may be. And it's actually valid because it shows that you are a designer that is always constantly wanting to learn. You always want to improve your knowledge, and that is what designers are. We've seen that firsthand recently, where many people are complaining about the advent of AI and how it just might take all our jobs away. But then the fact is, many people that are actually using ChatGPT have and the other AI platforms have found that it actually can increase our work rate. So, for example, my friend found a way to be able to use ChatGPT to completely draft out his company's entire design system and fill in everything, his design tokens, his color, his typography, everything. So this is something that you could have spent hours trying to come up with a particular documentation for, but just a few prompts. Sorry. Yeah. So just a few prompts into the AI software was able to provide all this documentation. So instead of staying in the past where you are just designing the way you used to do things, designers should be ready to embrace new methods of doing things. And every single project you engage in is an opportunity for you to learn something. So this is where you want to tell your recruiter or whoever is reading your case study what you learned. What did you learn in the course of this case study? Did you learn that sometimes it could be that you learned better time management? Sometimes you learned a particular design process that you've not used before. There are different design processes. The design thinking process taught by the Google UX course, I don't know if any of you have ever thought of heard about it, is just one of the many types of design processes. There's the lean UX process, there's the agile process, there's the double diamond process. There are different processes. As for feature ideation, there are different ways for you to get new, for you to brainstorm on features. There's the crazy eights, there's card sorting, there's different ones. For user personas, there is not every time you have to use a user persona. There are also different methods depending on the project you're working on. You may have to learn a new way of doing things instead of using the how might we, or instead of using your user persona, you might decide to use the jobs to be done model where you outline what job you need to do for this problem to actually be completed. So with each and every case study, with each and every problem that you solve as a designer, there's a new knowledge that must be added. And this your conclusion where you're wrapping things up is one place where you really want to show them that yeah, I was able to learn something. It could even be an introduction to a new industry. You'd maybe probably it was on Web3 or it was on fintech or it was on furniture or housing, and that's the first time you're designing something for that particular industry. So this is where you really want to show it. Then if you had more time, what would you have done better? Most times we are clouded by our deadlines. We are trying as much as possible to make sure that we meet our deadlines, and that is the reason why we may not really push much time into research or push much time into design or push more time into doing features. So maybe we come up with MVP. This is the point. This is the time where we add that. Maybe if I had more time, I would have done more iterations to make sure that the number of people that are dropping off can reduce even further. Or maybe if I had more time, I would have designed for dark mode Only if I had more time, I would have gone deeper into making sure that I met all the standard usability standards set by the World Center for Accessibility Guidelines (WCAG). Yeah, I think I got it right. I'm not sure though, but yeah, this is the point where you add what exactly you'd have done if you had more time, and then finally the plans for your product. So, what is your next steps? Maybe after this, if you are like working at a company, or probably it's like a side project that you are doing, you're collaborating with people to do something that would eventually go live, and maybe this was like the MVP product. This is the point where you talk about what you're going to do next. So for example, for this particular product you worked on, for this Luffy's product, for example, cvbuilder.com, you worked on improving the flow of the landing page to increase the number of signups. What do you do next? Probably the next thing you want to do is to increase the number of people that are creating accounts, or you want to increase the number of you want to increase the retention rate on the main product, which is the CV builder, because it's possible that people come and they've visited the website and they've entered the CV builder, but because probably the UX of the CV builder is poor, they did not have the opportunity to really explore the CV builder, and then they drop off there. If you were hired to improve the conversion rate of the landing page, that might not necessarily be your job. But if that was your initial task, then the other one is not an aspect that really concerns you at that particular moment. So you also want to talk about your next steps. After talking about what you learned, you want to talk about your next steps. What is the next thing you're going to do for that product? And that's pretty much it. If we're wrapping up, we've been able to learn a little bit about how we can tell a story. We tell our presentation like we're telling a story, and that stories aren't boring, so you don't want to bore your recruiters. Instead, you want to make sure that you identify who your audience is, and make sure you craft your story in a way that they get what they're coming there for, and they achieve the goal, which is to add you to the list of people that they are going to consider. Or even if you blow their minds really well, you get the job straight up. But for you to do that, you need to set the tone of your presentation. Give them context as to what they are expected to see as they go through your presentation. You can use a really nice story of like a user story, like I did with Luffy. There's nothing wrong with starting your presentation with something like that. Maybe you're using a user story like Luffy, and you're saying, this person is having this problem, but how would I solve this problem? Here is how I went ahead to solve it. Then you show your workings. This is where you show the percentage you got from your research. How many percent of people are actually doing this? And then how did you get these numbers? Because you have to validate the fact that you're not lying. You actually really went out and did the research. And then you brainstorm, and then you come up with features. You ask yourself the how might we questions. How might we solve this problem? And then after that, you now show your show the aftermath of all your stress, the aftermath of all your hard work. You prepare to pick. You prepare their minds for what they are about to see. You make them long for it, and then you blow their minds with your design. You show them, you compare side by side. If it's a redesign, you compare side by side. This was what was there before, this is how it was fixed. This was what was there before, this is how it was fixed. Then you show them, this was the amount of people that were facing this problem before, and this is the new amount of people that are facing this problem before. It need to have reduced for it to be valid. If it's a problem, it needs to have reduced for it to be valid. Then it's also the part where you talk about how exactly you went about with the whole. Okay, I think yeah, I think I lost my train of thought. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, you blow their minds in this particular part, and you move to the last step, which is wrapping up with your conclusions. You conclude, you talk about what you learned, and you wrap up. Talk about your next steps, and that's all. At this point, your recruiter is already mind blown. If you're able to follow all the steps, your recruiter is going to be mind blown and they are all in their heads like, we have to hire this guy. So I hope I've been able to show how that can be done. It's something that would involve quite some practice. So it's okay if you don't really get it on your first try. My first case study is very bad. It's currently unpublished. It's you can't find it anywhere on the internet. So that's how much you don't really have to get it on your first try. But many of the things I know now are things that I did not know then, and that is what I've been able to try and put into this presentation. The case study process is not really a linear one. Instead, you want to see it as a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning, you set the pace, you introduce them. The middle, you pick, you give them what exactly happened, you show your process and everything, and then you conclude and the end. Thank you. That's all actually. So it's at this point I would welcome any questions from anyone that might have one of those. If there are questions, I hope there are questions too. I really hope there are questions. So yeah. Okay. Lost. Okay, please ask your question. What's going on? How what can I improve? What should I touch on? Okay, what part? Or like the whole thing? Ah, the whole thing. Okay. So we are talking about. Okay, so we are talking about presentations and case studies. Yeah. Let's see. Let's see. So we're talking about presentations and case studies. Yeah. We talked about how your case study should be like a story. The whole, the whole point of this is your case study should be like a story. Many case studies out there aren't. They don't take the storytelling approach. So it's it makes it hard for them to catch the attention of the recruiter in the short amount of time that the recruiter has to be able to scan through your work. So what you are trying to do at that particular instance is tell them a story and make it interesting so that they can spend more time reading through your process and come to the decision to pick you for the role. So what you do is you set the tone for your case study. For you start with the introduction. You talk about your problem statement. Your problem statement is the part where you talk about what is the problem you're solving. That was the part where I said the bounce rates of the landing page that we used in my example was very high. And to fix this, I redesigned the landing page, and here is my process. That's like the problem statement. The problem statement here is that the bounce rates of the landing page was high. And I explained what bounce rates are. The bounce rates is the rate at which people drop off the page without doing what they came there for. So you give them that problem statement, help them to understand the context. What exactly is the case study they're about to read about? Then you show them the numbers behind your research. That's where you show how you found out that this bounce rate problem was actually an issue. So you conduct research. There are various ways of conducting research. I believe that has been touched on by another mentor. Any of the research methods you use, whether it's Google Forms or in-person research or video call, whichever of the research methods you use, you try to generate metrics for how many people are actually facing this problem and find out how exactly the problem affects people, and that is where all these percentages come from. So 67% of the people that you did your research on faces this problem, or 85% of people that you did your research on don't have access to this. If you're like building like a water app, for example, find out that 85% of people in Nigeria don't have access to water. You are building a banking app. You're saying that 91% of people are unbanked, like they do not use digital banking services. So this is the point where you are trying to validate your problem. You've already mentioned the problem that you're trying to solve, which is that the bounce rates are high. This is the point where you prove that the bounce rates are high by providing data that backs up that claim. Then the next part is making sure that your problem that you're trying to solve is obvious. So the problem should drive the solution. Why exactly is this guy coming here? And this is how I plan to fix it. So how can I fix it? That when does case study come in? The case study comes in after you're done with your entire design process. But for you to be able to do it properly, you need to have been documenting from the get-go. So you're not writing your case study when immediately you get the task, say design this or redesign this landing page that I'm using in my example. You're not writing your case study at that particular time. Instead, your case study is at the end. You've started the process of redesigning. You've gotten to the middle part. You've done everything. You did your research. You've done the design. You've done your final testing, and then you are documenting your process of how you got to that part. The case study is literally a documentation of your UX process. We are talking about how you got to that particular part. So all these things that are here about presenting your work is presenting the data, your research, your design, everything that you did. You're presenting it to your recruiter because you can't tell them every single thing that happened. You're not there to tell the recruiter this is what I did. Instead, if you are just going to have to write what you did in a way that they can come and make it easy to read. Make it easy for them to read. All right then. So the problems are obvious. You look for a way to make sure that they are obvious. Then you give your end result to them. Showcase your design. You showcase the result of your final your testing, your iteration, how exactly you fix the problem, and then you come to a conclusion. You wrap things up. You talk about things you learned. Talk about what you'd have done better, and talk about your next steps. And yeah, that's pretty much everything. Uh, is there any other questions? Template or guide? Hmm. There are a lot of templates on the internet for case studies, but it's not something that I would recommend. That's because a lot of people are also using these case studies templates and it doesn't really make you stand out. Another reason is because there are different processes for different problems. So the major the major problem I've been talking about using as an example throughout this presentation is a redesign of a landing page. The process you follow when you're trying to redesign a landing page is completely different from a process you follow when a random founder walks up to you and say they want to build an app that helps people to connect themselves with doctors in their area. It's not something that they already have. It's something that you're going to have to start to think about and then perform your research for. So the process is not the same. So if you get a case study, it's not something. It's if you get a case study template that encompasses both, it doesn't really show what you personally did. But I can after the class, I can send a couple of good case studies that I thought was very well written that we could pick a thing or two from. I don't know. Would that be fine? That just sure. Any other questions? Okay. I think that will be all. Okay, Jonathan. Yeah, Jonathan, please
Which
go
one is
ahead.
that?
Hello? Hello? Jonathan? Can't hear you.
Check the chat.
Oh, chat. Oh, the first one is Hausa, the second is English, third is Japanese, fourth is Spanish, and the final one is supposed to be Igbo, but the typeface I use does not really support the accents. They're supposed to be like two dots under the O. So you guys are gonna have to forgive me for that part. So yeah, I think that's all. I think that's all. So thank you everyone for having me, and I hope you have a good night or good day wherever you are. Yes. Uh, yeah. Yes. Right. It should.